Welcome to the video for chapter 32 of the Cambridge Introduction to Sanskrit, which is going to tell you about first and second person pronouns. As in English, first and second person pronouns have one form for all genders, and so I, we, you, and so on can be used both for and by men and women. A woman can refer to herself as I, and a man can refer to himself as I. Contrast this with third-person pronouns, where both Sanskrit and English do distinguish between the three genders, between masculine, feminine, and neuter. And so, for example, in English, anyone that is masculine would be referred to as he, anyone who's feminine would be referred to as she, and anything that's neuter would be referred to as it. Furthermore, in first and second-person pronouns, nominative and vocative are the same. In the first-person pronoun, I cannot really be addressed by someone. Even if you were to talk to yourself, you would probably address yourself in the second person as you. And in the second person, you, in a sentence such as "you are nice," could be seen as nominative, i.e. the subject of the sentence, or it could be seen as vocative, given that it refers to the one who is being addressed. Because of this overlap, we have only one form for nominative and vocative in both pronoun paradigms, and therefore in the tables that you will see in a minute there will be no vocative slot. There are many formal parallels between the two paradigms, but still they present us with numerous new forms, so what we need to do is first of all just look them over and then use the notes that are provided to help us with memorization. So let's begin with the forms of the first person pronoun, which in the singular means I, in the dual the two of us, and in the plural we or us. Now in the singular we have the forms aham, mam, maya, machyam, mat, mama, mayi. We also have a few alternative forms, namely in the accusative ma and in the dative and genitive me. Those are so-called enclitic forms, which we're going to come back to later in this video. But just to look at the main forms, aham, mam, maya, machyam, mat, mama, mayi. When we do that, we will see various familiar elements. For example, the accusative singular ends in m. The instrumental ends in aya, which is something we already know from, for example, long a stems of sena, army. The instrumental singular is senaya. So we've got the same thing here. Then the ablative ends in t, which may remind us of the ablative singular of short a stems, both in the masculine and neuter, where we had narat and mitrat. Here we don't have at as the ending, we just have at. And finally, in the locative, we have a form that ends in short I, which is exactly what we've already seen in all the locative singulars of other consonant stems. However, in addition to these various familiar features, we have various elements that are new and are different from anything we've seen before, and so it probably is easiest to familiarize ourselves with the singular of this paradigm by just straightforwardly memorizing it. So learn to go aham, mam, maya, machyam, mat, mama, mayi. Once you can do that, try it from the bottom to the top, mayi, mama, mat, machyam, maya, mam, aham. Something that might help, perhaps, is the fact that in English we have a slight formal parallel in that we have, for the nominative, a different stem or a different form than we have for all the other cases. In the nominative we use the form I, and in all the other cases we use forms that begin with m, so for example me, of me, for me, and so on. And we've got the same thing in Sanskrit, where the nominative singular is aham, and all the other cases begin with ma, or begin with m. Then the dual is awam, awabhyam, awayoch. So in the instrumental dative and ablative, and in the genitive and locative, we have endings that are very easily recognizable. We've seen them in all other duals so far. We have abhyam and ayoch. The nominative and accusative, on the other hand, has an ending that doesn't really look like a nominative-accusative dual, and therefore the form awam just needs to be memorized. What makes the dual a little easier is at least that the stem remains the same from nominative all the way to the locative, and so we have awam, awabhyam, awayoch. In the plural then, we have wayam, asman, asmabich, asmabhyam, asmat, asmakam, asmasu. And again, we have a few alternative forms, namely nach in the accusative, in the dative, and in the genitive. And again, those are enclitic forms which are going to be discussed later. Now, in the plural, just like in the singular, we have one stem for the nominative and a different stem for the rest of the paradigm. So we have wayam and then we have asma for the rest of the cases. This is similar to what we've got in English, where we have we in the nominative and us for all the other cases. And here again we have a number of familiar features. For example, an is the ending for the accusative, abich for the instrumental, and then su, asma, su as the ending for the locative. But again, in addition to these familiar features, we have a variety of elements that are new, and so again it probably is best to rote memorize this paradigm. Wayam, asman, asmabich, asmabhyam, asmat, asmakam, asmasu. When you memorize this paradigm, or this part of the paradigm, pay particular attention to the dative. Asmabhyam is similar to what we've seen before. So far we've seen byach as an ending in the dative plural, and we've seen byam as an ending in the dual. Here we have byam, ending in an M, but using a short a. Make sure that you don't confuse this with byach, which is what you have in non-pronouns, and byam, which is what you have in various duals. Finally, another snag in this paradigm is that the ablative plural, asmat, is very similar to asmat, which is the ablative singular of ayam, idam. So asmat, first person pronoun ablative plural, asmat, ablative singular of ayam, idam. Make sure you don't confuse the two. Next up then the second person pronoun, which in the singular means you, in the dual the two of you, and in the plural you all of you, or simply you. This is best memorized in parallel with the first person pronoun because the forms for the most part use the same endings but different stems. So for example in the dual, where the first person pronoun was awam, awabhyam, and awayuch, here now we have yuwam, yuwabhyam, yuwayuch. So what we need to do is simply memorize a new stem. And if we know the forms of the first person, all these forms yuwam, yuwabhyam, yuwayuch will be perfectly recognizable. Then let's go on to the plural, where we have yuyam, yushman, yushmabich, yushmabhyam, yushmat, yushmakam, and yushmasu. Again, these forms are completely parallel to what we find in the first person forms, but the stem is not wa in the nominative and a in the other cases, but rather it is you in the nominative and you in the other cases. And after this you, the s that follows changes into sh due to rookie. So, as long as you know the forms of the first person pronoun, and as long as you know that the second person pronoun has the stem you and you in the plural, you can recognize all the plural forms easily. In the singular, this is almost also the case. For the most part, we have the same endings, but there are just a few exceptions. So we have twam, twam, twaya, tubyam, twat, tawa, twayi. The stem that we here have is tu, which in front of a vowel appears as tw, so the u changes into its consonantal counterpart w, as we've seen it do many times before. This tu actually is related to tu, meaning you in Latin, and thou, meaning you singular in slightly older English. Now we have twam and twam as opposed to aham and mam. Then we have twaya as opposed to maya. Then in the dative we have something slightly different. We don't have machyam, but we have tubyam. So tubyam is a form that we need to memorize. Then in the ablative, twat as opposed to mat, so completely parallel. Then in the genitive singular we have tawa as opposed to first singular mama, so that too would be a form that we need to memorize. And then in the locative we have twayi as opposed to mayi, and so that's a form that again is completely parallel in its endings to what we find in the first person. So in the singular, what we need to do is remember that the stem is tu, which appears as tu before a consonant and as tw in front of a vowel. And we need to memorize the fact that in the dative we have a different form and in the genitive we have a different form, namely tupiam and tawa. Finally, a couple of notes on individual forms of both of those pronouns. First of all, the stem forms, i.e. the forms that are used inside compounds, are mat for the first person and twat for the second person pronoun. Compare these to yat, the stem form of the relative pronoun ya, or tat, the stem form of the third person pronoun sach, that you were introduced to in chapters 20 and 22. If you would like to see an example of one of these stem forms in an actual compound, look at mat parama, which literally means whose highest, parama is me, mat, which is a bahuvri compound used to mean someone who has me as their highest, i.e. someone who is devoted to me, and this is something that a god might say. Next up, enclitics, i.e. these short alternative forms that we've seen but not really looked at in detail. These are used whenever no particular emphasis on the pronoun form is needed. So, for example, if you want to say he did this for us in the sense of especially for us, you would use the full pronoun form, which is asmabhyam. But if, on the other hand, you do not want to add any particular emphasis on the us, for example, because you want to say he and not someone else did this for us, then you would typically use the enclitic form, which in this case would be nach. Note that the dual enclitic forms were not included in the tables. These are now for the first person pronoun and vam for the second person pronoun. These would be the enclitic forms of accusative, dative, and genitive dual, so exactly the same cases for which we also found enclitics in the singular and plural. But unlike in the singular and plural, here we have just one form for all three cases, now in the first person and vam in the second person dual. Then finally, something that might help you remember these forms more easily, the stems of these Sanskrit pronouns are actually related to their English counterparts. So, for example, the m at the beginning of the stem that we find in the first person singular forms, so for example, mam, maya, machyam, and so on, this m is related to the m in English forms such as me or my. The t that we find in the singular forms of the second person pronoun are related to older English forms such as thou, thee, or thine. When you have a t in Sanskrit, that often corresponds to a s or the in English. Then the first person plural nominative form, yam, consists of y plus am. We find this am added to a number of pronouns. Y is the pre-vocalic alternative form for we, which is very similar to English we. And then finally, the stems that we find used in the second person plural forms, so you and you, are related to the English word you. That was it for this chapter. We hope that you found this video helpful. And if you have any comments or suggestions, we would love to hear from you. Please do write to us at rupal@cambridge-sanskrit.org. And now, for your own work on this material, good luck and have fun!